Hey everybody, and welcome back to Semi Stories. Today we got some interesting tales from r/RPGHorrorStories, starting with OP who decides to give D&D a go, but inadvertently invites a crazy Catgirl into the group. Careful, this video is a little bit not suitable for work. Well guys, this is the only real horror story I have, and unfortunately it is one completely suited to Valentine's Day, although in an utterly twisted manner. Very NSFW. The whole situation was bizarre, unexpected, and came completely out of nowhere, in a rapid and completely fiery implosion of the group that rivaled the Hindenburg in terms of suddenness and sheer scale of catastrophic collapse. So sit back, dear listener, and indulge this tale of deceit, coercion, questionable sexual appetites, breakups, and of course, cringe. Lots and lots of cringe. Our cast consists of me, the DM, Dave, my roommate playing an half-orc fighter, who was not present for the session in question but relevant later, Annie, Dave's girlfriend, playing a halfling cleric, Rich, a friend of mine and Dave's, playing a zany gnome sorcerer, and Trish, the problem player, playing a fox folk, which is a reskinned tabaxi bard, because of course she bloody was. She could also never quite decide if this person was more cat or more fox or both. It was just weird. So we cast our minds back to the days of yore, 2013. I was at university and we were playing 3.5e D&D. For context, I'm not really the typical nerd archetype. I am fairly tall, fairly muscular, and besides my biggest interests outside of TTRPGs, science, maths, and nerdy movies and video games is playing rugby, and I was on the uni team. I am, or I was, being an adult sucks, something of a socialite. I like to host parties, I love being the center of attention, I love singing, and in short, my highest IRL stat is probably charisma. My lowest, apparently, is wisdom. Yes, I am a dude bro. The exact stereotype you're currently thinking of. That one. Yep, that's me. After one such get-together at my place, which was inevitably always a strange mix of guys from the rugby team, of course my mates, I studied physics, and my flatmates and their mates, etc. Myself, Dave, and Annie were talking, and I suggested the idea of running a D&D game, and they were both quite into it. Neither of them had played before, but Dave informed me that our mutual friend, Rich, played, which I didn't know. And Annie said that she had a friend that would be super excited to join because she was obsessed with TTRPGs. Enter Trish. Trish was the only person who attended that I didn't know, which naturally made her something of a wildcard. But being the sociable person I was, this didn't bother me at all. When I first met her, all seemed fine. She was lively and excitable. Her and Annie both did practical effects design, and she was artsy and enthusiastic with a real twinkle in her eye, which I would realize all too late wasn't a twinkle, but the barely perceptible electrical feedback which indicated the short-circuiting of the sanity wires in her brain. I thought she would be a joy to have at the table rolling dice with us. If only I had known the depths of the anime love interest complex she apparently had. I might have realized that the rattling noise wasn't her dice tower, but the loose marbles rattling around in her skull. So anyway, from the very first session, the group was great and everyone's characters were really fun, if a little tropey. This is why I didn't bat an eyelid at Trish playing up that bard hitting on every NPC. We all had a good laugh about it, and I responded with NPCs flirting or not flirting in the exact same manner as they would with Dave's character, who often tried his luck, to all of our amusement, with his -1 to charisma checks. Thus, I thought that it was all in good fun, and so did everyone else, because nobody could be insane enough to think that imaginary characters interacting automatically meant that the DM wants to bone them. Right? Anyway, getting ahead of myself a little here. There were some red flags, minor ones by the standards of this subreddit to be sure, and these included highlights such as Trish being a little obsessive about anime and talking about her perfect man being an exact description of some protagonists from a particular anime, the name of which I don't remember, and in the way that she described her tabaxi, completely with big innocent doe eyes and playful curves and swaying hips. She also showed up wearing fox ears at some point. I thought she was just really getting into the game and playing her character, which in really disturbing sort of way was right on the money. She also had a weird habit of maintaining eye contact with me for uncomfortably long periods of time. But I, with my IRL dumpstat and wisdom, didn't put it together that she might have a crush on me, in case where this story is leading wasn't horrifyingly obvious. I was enjoying the group and the immersion. Everyone spent a lot of time talking in character and really getting into it, including Dave and Annie, who had been a little hesitant about RP at first. Trish spent almost no time whatsoever talking out of character. Another mild red flag that I overlooked entirely, but one that stands out from the rest in this little retrospective. And so, dear listener, begins the fateful night. Note that Dave, my roommate, was not present for this session, for the night is dark and full of fox-ear discomfort. It was a RP heavy session. The previous had been a sizable combat session with one of the villains, and a small side story arc had been completed, so there was a lot of looting, paying off debts and favors, collecting accolades, drinking in bars, being paraded on the shoulders of the liberated village, all of the normal tropes. This also coincided with the end of our second year exam period, so we were in an IRL similar mood. Everyone was having a great time in a low pressure session, drinking a decent amount both IRL and in-game. Everyone was smiling and having fun. Trish's character decided that tonight was the night, to try and get it on with the burly human bartender NPC she had been flirting with throughout the campaign whenever they had been in this town. Again, I only picked this up in retrospect, but this NPC was who most closely, although not even that effing closely, resembled me in how I had described them. And she had singled this NPC out repeatedly. Anyway, in the revelry of the villain's defeat and the town celebration, she succeeded on her seduction role for this poor bartender. I made a joke about them going off to have very scratchy cat sex, for which he will probably need his back bandaged, and attempted to fade to black. Trish was having none of it. Obviously, she wanted to vicariously play out this encounter between these two abstractions in a display that would have made Sigmund Freud himself make the concerned Tom face. She interjected, describing how her character waited for him to go and get her drinks, before taking off all her clothes, changing it to just one of his thin shirts and waiting on his bed in a seductive pose, and began to purr. Okay, a little too much detail, and she has a creepy, lascivious look in her eyes while she describes it. But fine, she had a couple of drinks and is a bit too much into it. I try once again with, as he sees you. He shuts the door behind himself with a smile. Anyway, back in the bar, Clupperdunk is in the midst of his absurd, levitating tankards performance when Trish again interjects, pouting a little this time. She describes how her character stares into his green eyes. My eyes are green, the NPC described as having blue eyes, and runs her clawed fingers through his brown hair. Again, you guessed it, matches description with me, not the NPC. She is now positively leering at me like I'm a cartoon steak. Rich catches on to this and looks as uncomfortable as I feel. Annie is giggling. I assumed this was just nervous laughter. Not so. I quite firmly cut to black this time, but Trish looks oddly satisfied and spends the rest of the session, which lasts less than half an hour, just staring at me and exchanging looks with Annie. At the end of the session, I'm set with the three of them, finishing drinks before they all head home. Trish asks if she can use the bathroom and excuses herself. Annie then gets up and declares that she is going home and asks if poor innocent bystander Rich will walk her across campus. They abruptly leave. I wait for Trish to come out of my room for 5 minutes. At this point, I'm like, if she's taking a dump in there, that's such an absolute piss take. Just wait until you get home. So I walk into my room, preparing to knock on the bathroom door. And what do I effing see? I see Trish. And what, dear listener, do you expect that she's wearing? Yep, that's right. There is a pile of her clothes and underwear at the foot of my bed. And her sole items of clothing are one of my t-shirts and her effing fox ears. Lying in what she apparently thought was a seductive pose was supposed to look like. If the only time you've heard the word seduction was in Japanese and the sentence ended with senpai. And as if this scene wasn't absurd and insane enough, she also effing purrs at me before giving me this look. which basically amounted to her stuffing as much of her bottom lip under her teeth as is reasonably possible in what appeared to be an attempt to devour her own chin, and blinking rapidly like she was trying to convey something in Morse code. Now, Trish is not an unattractive woman by any means, even in the midst of a mating ritual considerably more bizarre than anything I've heard Sir David Attenborough narrate, but I am absolutely not into her whatsoever. I do not see her in that way, and honestly, I find her a bit weird. Shocking, I know. This should be good enough reason on its own, but what takes this from just uncomfortable and awkward to shockingly inappropriate is that at this time, I had a girlfriend, which she and everyone else at the table knew. At this point, I'm standing in the doorway, probably looking like I've seen an effing ghost, and my brain has turned to mush trying to decipher the incomprehensible spectacle unfolding before my eyes. She then stops deep-throating her chin and says, "If you want your t-shirt back, you'll have to take it off me." I am now legitimately pissed off with her at this level of inappropriate behavior. I tell her, as calmly as possible, that she can keep the shirt, but she needs to leave. She scowls at me and I truly wish I was joking, hisses at me like a cat. Despite how deeply uncomfortable and annoyed I am, it is an act of such sheer abject absurdity that I cannot help but burst out laughing. She immediately loses her mind, grabs her clothes in a bundle and runs outside my flat in just my t-shirt, not stopping to even put on some underwear, screaming at me the whole way. Apparently, either Annie or Rich has forgotten something, and they're about 100 meters away, walking back towards the flats. They and everyone else around sees this 2/3 naked cat fox woman throwing a hyper tantrum over getting rejected, creating an utter spectacle in the quad, which is overlooked by several blocks of halls, not to mention other students who just happened to be outside. I would have been mortified if I wasn't too busy being somewhere between utter speechless disbelief and repressing uncontrolled mirth. Annie runs over and throws her coat over the now hysterically crying Trish, and then starts berating me herself, calling me selfish and ungrateful, telling me how Trish is better for me than my then girlfriend. I'm in utter shock and disbelief at this point. This is totally out of character for Annie. Now knowing what to do in the midst of this bizarre and mutually humiliating meltdown, I just give an apologetic wave and grimace to Rich, go inside, and I close the door. I call Dave and I fill him in on whatever the hell just happened. He's as baffled, shocked, and angry as I am, especially after I describe Annie's reaction. He calls her and demands to know what the hell is going on. As it turns out, Trish and Annie had concocted the events of the evening together. Annie had informed Trish that Dave would not be present, making it a good night to make her move. And Trish had apparently described the rest of her cringe-inducingly misguided plan. This is also why Annie was giggling at Trish's in-character shenanigans earlier in the night, and why she had so abruptly convinced Rich to leave with her when Trish had asked to use my bathroom. This, it seems, was the signal. Dave called me almost 2 hours later, which was almost 4 AM by this point, and said that he had had a huge argument and shouting match with Annie over the phone, and that they had broken up. I received a text from Rich the next day, saying he didn't want to play with us anymore because he couldn't handle the drama. Although I explained to him that Trish would absolutely not be there again, I couldn't really begrudge his decision to leave, with such a sour taste in his mouth. I blocked Trish's number almost immediately after she left, and the only correspondence I had with Annie was a text from her which just said, "Before I blocked her too." Dave and I never played D&D together again, though we are still friends to this day. So that's it. That's my one and only horror story, and most of it had absolutely nothing to do with the actual game. Sometimes the creepy, predatory weirdo isn't a basement-dwelling neckbeard, but a pretty girl of half your size with more screws loose than that piece of IKEA furniture your grandma tried to put together, which apparently thinks acting like an anime catfox woman is the height of seduction. Yeah, I might have to drink bleach after that one. Saying these words out loud left a sour taste in my mouth for sure. This hobby just seems to attract the weirdest type of people. I luckily never had an experience quite this bad, but I've known some interesting types over the years that can really strain the group at times. Everything in the story just got worse and worse. The behavior, the conspiracy between the girls, the actual event, and then the revelation that OP already had a girlfriend. What happened to OP seems like it's straight out of some crazy soap opera. And of course, poor old Rich stuck in the middle. I'm glad things worked out in the end and Dave getting rid of that other psycho. While I have you guys here, if you enjoyed the video so far, be sure to like and give us a subscribe as it helps a lot. Well then, on to the next one. In our next story, in a similar vein, OP is DMing for a group of guys who act very awkward and out of pocket, but then she finds out about their secret group chat. This might be a little long, because a few things happened during the campaign. First off, for the longest time I was the only girl in a party of 7. Although this isn't as dramatic or as awful as some of the other stories, it still makes me angry when I think about it. About 3 years ago, I made a post on Instagram offering to DM 5e for anyone that was interested, because my previous group had split up after leaving college. I was quickly approached by an old high school friend, Jack, who said that he had a group gathered and I was welcome to come and meet everyone and decide if we all got along well. Jack was always very sweet in high school, so I agreed and we all met at his flat that weekend to play a few non-D&D related games together and get pizza. After a few hours we started talking about character ideas, rules, etc. I suggested we talk about our boundaries in games so everyone knew what we were getting into. I'm a relaxed DM, I don't mind if a player decides they want to sleep with the barmaids as long as it doesn't mess up with the game. The only thing I said I would not do, period, was the R word. Everything else is at the discretion of everyone. This is important to know. Fast forward to actually playing. I'm not sure if other people have done this before, but I ran the Death House part of Curse of Strahd for about 4 sessions, till everyone was comfortable playing together and then homebrewed a campaign from that. The guys were all pretty great up until this point. However, one of them, we'll call him Mike, began to make a few awkward comments to me. Mike decided to play a bard, and took my "I don't care if you hook up with NPCs" very seriously. He tried to F every single female. It got to the point where I had to speak with him out of the game, and he got very passive aggressive by telling me that I had already said it was okay. Despite this, he did calm down a bit and we continued playing. A few sessions later, Mike tries to R a female orc while she's restrained and unconscious as the party were elsewhere. I'm not even sure of his motives here, but he tried to make his explanations of his actions vague enough that they weren't specifically R, but obviously were anyway. I stopped the game immediately and told him that if he didn't quit it, he was out for the rest of the session. He laughed with his buddies and then stopped. Later that night he sent me hand-drawn pictures of an orc, clearly modeled after myself, with his character grabbing her boobs. I told him that stuff was inappropriate and he wasn't welcome at the next session. The next day he called me in tears, saying he was really sorry and had drank way too much the night before. He also admitted he had a crush on me, but didn't know how to convey that. I politely told him I was flattered but not interested, and let him back into the party. The rest of the party had been trying to convince me to let him back into the game because he hadn't done that much wrong anyway. Yes, I am an idiot. Apart from that event, I had been having fun with that campaign. Mike is no longer a douchebag at that session. He's quiet and one of the guys tells me that I embarrassed him and now he's struggling to connect. But that's not my problem. Fast forward a few more weeks and things are getting weird again. 2 more members of the party have attempted asking me out on dates and I once again politely declined and carried on. The sessions are now a little awkward for me, because all the guys are flirting with pretty much every female NPC I place in the game. Slowly but surely, within a week another guy confesses his love to me, and I'm no longer enjoying the session, so I plan on finishing up one story branch and then calling it a day with the campaign and leaving. Not even a day later, Jack sends me about 20 screenshots from a private group chat of the boys. They literally had bets on who could sleep with me first. The entire group chat was discussing ways they could flirt or seduce me, a few screenshots of my own conversations between them, etc. It was so awful to look at because I thought these guys had actually been enjoying my sessions, but I was basically just there as a game myself. Jack told me he was incredibly sorry he hadn't said anything sooner, and that he was about to pull out of the campaign because of them. I told the party over Discord that I knew what was going on, and that I was disgusted and would not DM for them ever again. I think I added in that none of them were even close to being physically attracted to me and then left. It's been a while since this happened, but I still haven't heard from any of those guys again. F's sake, guys, why feel the need to ridicule and drool over a girl at the table, let alone a DM? You know how uncommon a good homebrew DM is to find? Jokes aside, I think it is an inherent problem not just in D&D, but in every nerdy hobby that people might have. It's fine to have a crush on someone you enjoy playing with, or to even ask them out, but why do guys and girls like that always feel the need to make it super weird? Oh yeah, the best way to get her to sleep with me is to flirt with her in-game and be a complete weirdo. Christ, just treat people like human beings, and if they say, no thank you, move on with your life. These guys are definitely not incels, because they chose to be alone, for real. Listen, you might just be sitting around a table pretending, but D&D for sure is a dangerous game. If you enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments, and I will see you guys on the next adventure. See ya!